If you are wondering, Chris, how many flowered shirts do you own? Because it seems like you wear flowered shirts in every video. My answer would be all of them. I own all of them. What is up, guys? Welcome everyone back to Cop Out Pet Peeves, the show where I rant about my least favorite tropes in books. Now, the literal definition of a cop-out is to avoid doing something that one ought to do. However, in books it is typically used to describe a stupid method that solves a character's problems, and typically this occurs when an author gives up on coming up with a good way to get a character out of a situation and takes the lazy route. And as always, these are my personal opinions, so deal with them. Today I'm talking about villain monologues, something that I personally despise. If you're wondering what I'm referring to, there are plenty of examples in media. Voldemort is often made fun of for making long and unnecessary speeches at the end of every book, as are the villains of Percy Jackson and the murderers in murder mysteries. Villain monologues can appear at any time in the story, though they typically occur in two places. The first is in the prologue, where the villain is recounting his vague, evil plans to his minions. But the second one is the one that's used much more often. It comes at the end of the story, when all the villain's plans have come to fruition, he has the protagonist in his clutches, and he's explaining everything that he did throughout the book. Now, it might just seem like I'm taking shots at an essential piece of storytelling for no good reason, but let me explain. I'm giving you the top 3 reasons that people use this trope and telling you how to do better. Number 1, it gives the reader a chance to learn about the villain's evil schemes that have been happening under the surface throughout the entire book. Let's talk about this one. I understand how this one can be important. Every villain has an evil plan that he or she's been working on since the very beginning of the story, and when you get to the end, you want to tell that story, tell the plan that the villain had, explain how it fits into the overall plot. But usually this monologue comes when the villain is standing in front of the protagonist, ready to murder them. And yet he finds it necessary in this moment to explain everything. What? If he were a good villain, he would just chop the protagonist's head off.
No biggie.
This one also ties directly into the next reason, so let's move on. Reason number 2, it gives your protagonist a chance to escape. Why though? This is when the trope most feels like a cop-out. Your villain just happened to want to evilly monologue. And what a coincidence, but it took the villain 1 minute and 22 seconds to give that monologue, which is the same amount of time that it took for your protagonist to slip out of his handcuffs and stab the villain, or the same amount of time that it took for the protagonist's friend to arrive. Wow. What good timing! So there are several ways to fix this. The first one is for the protagonist to request information from the villain and then slowly work it out themselves. This is the simplest method you can use in order to solve the problem, seeing as it doesn't really change much. If you already have a manuscript sitting somewhere and you don't want to revise an entire 3 chapters due to this problem, you can just change the conversation a bit. Instead of the villain just willy-nilly giving information away, this solution allows the hero to save themselves. In this scenario, the hero is taking their fate into their own hands and working it out themselves, rather than the villain just talking about his evil plans and thus ruining his evil plans. A second way to fix this is to have the evil scheme revealed after the climax is over. This means that the villain is either in jail and just kind of talking about what he did to people, or the villain is dead and the protagonist or investigators are kind of figuring out what happened throughout the book and putting the pieces together themselves. And reason number 3, it gives the story a vague and underlying evil. Does it though? This one specifically occurs to villain monologues that happen early in the story, typically in prologues. In this one, the villain tells his minion about his evil plans, and the reader gets a sense of how epic this story is going to be, and then has to sit through 15 chapters of the hero doing jack shit in their everyday lives. I know that having an evil prologue at the beginning of your story might seem like a good idea because it lets your readers know that there is an underlying evil that will eventually pop up in the story. But in all honesty, if you have to provide a generic villain monologue at the beginning of your story, then there might be some more underlying issues in your entire novel, such as the fact that the characters don't really have any purpose or goal or motivation in the beginning of your story, and that your story isn't very cohesive. So if you want to show your readers that evil is coming, there are other ways to do it that don't involve vague evil monologues at the beginning of your stories. One that pops into my mind is, maybe a news story or a newspaper article saying that there's been an attack on something or something like that. So as always, thank you guys for watching. You are the greatest for being able to sit through my ranting. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and come back next week. And until then, may the gods of plot be ever on your side. Every villain has an evil plan that he's been working on since he or she